He is a friend of ours here at Talk. His name is Mr. Matthew Torbitt. He is a former Labour advisor, and he is very, very chipper because his beloved Stockport County thrashed Port Vale Football Club in my beloved Stoke-on-Trent area just the other night. Matthew, how are you doing?
Very chipper, as you say. Early days yet, though, Gullis. We'll see.
Well, look, Matthew, you know why we're on. Rachel Reeves has admitted that she was breaking the law by unlawfully renting out her swanky London home without the relevant licence that Southwark Council demands. She has held herself to a standard, to be fair, where she's actually submitted to Sir Keir Starmer that she should go before the commissioner that advises Sir Keir Starmer on the ministerial code. But quite remarkably, Sir Keir Starmer, within hours, replied to her saying he's had a chat and they've decided there's nothing to see here. The problem is, Matthew, that Southwark Council in October 2024, because I've looked at it myself, openly put on a press release out where they took a landlord and a letting agents, the letting agents being the ones who Rachel Reeves is predominantly blaming, for not applying for the relevant licence and fining them tens of thousands of pounds, which also, by the way, allows the tenants to claim back the rent they paid without the licence. So Rachel Reeves could be about to lose tens of thousands as well in rent paid back to her tenants. Is this, however, Matthew, a big story, or is this just certain media channels, like, for example, Talk, finding any excuse to swing at this Labour government?
I don't think it's just Talk. I think the media will take an interest. She's ultimately, it appears, broken the rules. I would probably say unwittingly, and I think the key thing for her, where she'll probably be okay, is the lettings agency she has used had a line in their agreement that said, we will let you know if you need this sort of licence. Now, they obviously haven't. She can only go off what she's got, and I do think it opens up a conversation when you look at Angela Rayner, Rushanara Ali and others, that you sort of need a permanent civil servant that knows this sort of stuff. We need to allow politicians of any stripe to get on with running the country. Should they be resigning on basically, in this case, a bit of life admin? I don't think it will have the cut through in the way Angela Rayner did, ultimately because the headlines for Angela Rayner were basically the Deputy Prime Minister should have paid tax and hasn't. I think this is almost a little bit too niche to get the cut through that Angela Rayner did with hers. And I think, in a way, listen, I've been very critical of this Labour government, and you may expect me to also stick up for them at points and say, well, you would say that, Matthew. I would rather Rachel Reeves resign because she's plunged us into a recession. I would rather judge Rachel Reeves on her results. I wouldn't necessarily expect her to resign because she's rented a house and not had the correct paperwork and not been made aware by a lettings agency that she needs it.
Do you think we're too quick in this country to demand for politicians to resign? The Conservatives are coming out very aggressive out the gate, calling for her resignation, or at the very least an inquiry, they're even going as far as saying, into this very issue. Do you think that actually at times we need to remember that politicians are humans, people are allowed to make mistakes, and if they are mistakes that some might say in this case are minor, that would be some people's view, that we should be able to forgive and forget?
Partially, it's not going to happen because this is politics, and I think in a way Labour may reap what they sow because they were incredibly heavy-handed with this sort of stuff when they were in opposition. And obviously opposition is very easy. You just go look at them lot, they're hopeless, they're horrible, they're corrupt, and we won't be. And then actually you realise there are certain things in government that are out of your hands, particularly if you're the Prime Minister. You don't know your ministers' lives and their rental agreements and whatever else. So there's an element of that. It does concern me. Certain media outlets, I would say, particularly newspapers, that when I see headlines of how we got rid of Angela Rayner, that's not your job as a newspaper. Your job is to scrutinise, ultimately to hold politicians to account. Your job is not to get rid, and that goes the other way. I think what a lot of newspapers have seen is how essentially Pippa Crerar at the Guardian's stories about Boris and during COVID basically brought him down, and now there is almost an addiction in Westminster of like, who can we get next, who can we get to resign, and again, I'd rather people, Angela, there was no choice. I said at the time Angela will have to go, but ultimately I would rather her go because she's not built 1.5 million houses, because her renters reform isn't working, or whatever it might be. I think this this niche sort of stuff with Rachel Reeves, and I have no doubt there will be others in time to come, because mistakes happen, people are busy, they're literally running a country. There'll be more of this, and I worry there's an addiction to headlines and otherwise.
But do you accept, Matthew, the problem for Rachel Reeves and many in his Labour government is the hypocrisy? I mean, Rachel Reeves herself tweeting from what appears to be her parliamentary X account for her constituency seat: "I welcome Leeds City Council's decision to expand their selective landlord licensing policy to include the Armley area." She goes on, "This scheme means private landlords in the area will be required by law to obtain a licence for any residential property." She obviously has, for a long time, it appears, lived in the Southwark area where this has been going on. I think it's actually a Labour-led council. Can people really believe what Sarah Jones MP was saying on the media round this morning, which was Rachel Reeves simply didn't know that she needed to apply for this, when this is something she herself is campaigning for?
Yes, I think you can believe it purely because she almost certainly didn't send that tweet and will have absolutely no idea about any of what has just been put out there. It is normally done by staff members such as myself, and you'll know this. People have communications officers that put this stuff out. Ultimately, the MP will sign it off. To her, it's a good news story. Great, we can piggyback on it. I will say, however, it's hard to plead ignorance when, if that was Mr. Jones further on down the road, it is incumbent on him to know if he needs the right licence and therefore would be punished otherwise. So I'm quite relaxed. I think maybe there should be an inquiry, let Laurie Magnus do his thing. Ultimately, she might pay a fine. I don't think this meets the threshold for a resignation. Purely, and actually it's not a sensible way of doing things, is it passes the optics ever so slightly, and we shouldn't run things like that. We shouldn't run things on outrage levels and what happens on Twitter. But unfortunately, this is the position we've got ourselves in politics. So I don't think it meets the threshold of Angela Rayner. If she has to pay a fine by the law, yeah, she should do so.
I was about to say, do you think Southwark Council should do the honourable thing, make sure there's not a two-tier system, which is a charge used against this Labour government time after time, and actually at least themselves look into this and determine whether they think a fine should be paid, bearing in mind, as I say, on the 18th of October 2024, in fact, I've tweeted it via my X account, the link to the story that makes it very clear that they took a landlord and a letting agent who hadn't applied for a licence through the system where they obviously faced a fine. Should Southwark Council do the right thing here and make sure Rachel Reeves, if required, has a fine levied against her?
Yeah, I think it's fair enough. I suppose the issue maybe is who's really liable and who's at fault. And I don't know, unfortunately, this sort of niche area of housing or lettings law, will it be the lettings agency that haven't done the correct due diligence and they should have to pay the fine? Is it incumbent on Rachel Reeves to do the checks anyway, just to be certain? I don't know. However, there's nothing wrong in the fact that if somebody has broken the law accidentally or otherwise, opening an investigation and ensuring that there isn't a two-tier. I think, again, it will just depend on who is really liable for this. And I'm sure there'll be, like the Spider-Man meme, lots of pointing fingers at each other on this, on who really has to pay, potentially. But, yeah, I don't see the harm in it.
And Matthew, final one from me. Do you see any opportunity for this Labour government to get some blue water, a bit of relief? It's been a pretty turbulent couple of weeks.
It's always possible, but I think, unfortunately, you're relying on other people making that blue water for you, that clear water for you. Is it Nigel Farage getting himself into all sorts of mither because he can't control his MPs? Is it the Tories continuing to be irrelevant and maybe their budget response, as I expect, will fall flat? That may save them from a budget that may also fall flat and anger people depending on how they feel about potential tax rises. I think, just to give my two penneth, like the two penneth rises that were affected, I think they should have done this in the first budget. I think you could have blamed Donald Trump and the trade tariffs and all the rest of it and gone, look, this is out of our hands. You were going to be unpopular anyway with some of the decisions you were making. Why not just come straight out the traps and try and recover this time? I think the problem she will now have is the media have already made much a meal of the fact that she said she wouldn't be coming cap in hand. There would not be further tax rises. And I think if you're that desperate, you're blaming Brexit and the Tories still. It's not going to go very well, I don't think. I have great concerns over it.
The Brexit argument I really find bizarre, Matthew. Why rehash the arguments from 2016 and indeed actually 2019, especially when Keir Starmer, who, let's not forget, was the face of a pro-second referendum, pro-Remain vote. Why would he want to rehash this argument, realign himself and remind everyone where he originally stood, and at the end of the day be outflanked again by the Greens and the Lib Dems, who are simply going to say, well, if it's so bad outside the EU, why not go back in it?
I wonder, and I don't know whether they think this far ahead or whether it is just surviving each week, I wonder whether we will see an election, if Keir Starmer is still there, leaning into the more progressive elements that he's losing to the Lib Dems and the Greens, and we actually look to potentially join a customs union and have that battle again over things like the EU, because they're going to need those sort of votes to get them over the line. I don't think an anti-Farage vote is going to be enough, despite what we've seen in Wales. I think you're going to need something to tempt those Liberals back over, and I wonder if it is part of a long-term plan amongst some of the Blairites in Number 10 to sort of almost begin the process of rejoining parts of it. I could be totally wrong, but that's been my thoughts over the last couple of weeks as we've seen, the aims to blame Brexit and other things for it.
Well, you're not confident. Spencer Livermore, former aide to Gordon Brown, former head, I think, of campaigns it was for Ed Miliband in what was obviously the unsuccessful general election. He's now in charge of the elections in Wales and Scotland and the council elections across England next May. You're not having Lord Livermore is going to somehow reignite the Labour machine, make sure that you take on the fight with Reform UK and the Nationalists in Wales and Scotland. Do you think Keir's still on the clock? Do you think that Labour MPs might give him till next May, but after then he is for the chop?
Yes, I think it is. The pressure will be insurmountable if you've got a whole host of backbench MPs who are on quite small majorities because of the tactics of winning the general election. If we're losing Wales and Scotland, and ultimately I think at this juncture we're going to get battered, you're going to lose your seat. Why would you not? I'm worried we're going to do what the Democrats did. They should have swapped out Joe Biden after the midterms. They did quite well out of the midterms. I don't think we will do quite well out of our sort of midterms, if you will, with these local elections and council elections. Swap out now whilst you have time. And I know we're not a party that sort of do that sort of thing, but you can either do that or probably lose the next election. And if you want your legacy essentially to be, we were the ones that had a landslide victory, and in one term we ushered in Nigel Farage. That's up to you, really.
Now, Matthew, final question for me, that many listeners to this station think you should be joining Reform UK. They're begging for it to happen. You were inundated. I saw with my own eyes at Reform UK's party conference with selfies galore. Bit of a celebrity on the centre-right, despite being a raging lefty, and I say that with a loving affection. But, Matthew, have you not thought yourself as a proud progressive, maybe it's time to get in bed with Zach Polanski and the Greens?
No, listen, I've had messages. I believe I'm due to sit down with Zach. Maybe I'll be doing his podcast. We can have a nice chat. My hope, as I tell everybody, is Andy Burnham. I will still be continuing to campaign for Andy Burnham. People think Andy Burnham's gone. He has not gone. I can tell you that with 100% confidence. And I think he's the person I'll be looking to try and help get in after May, if as expected the results will go. So no plans for me to change party. And I think even if I was, if I got to a real point where I thought Labour were a real no-hoper, I've always been more independent-minded, and I would sit without a party, I think, and continue to talk from the sidelines in a very fair way, I hope, which is what I try to do.
Well, Matthew, you're a good friend of us here on Talk, the home of common sense, and the listeners always enjoy hearing your voice. Thank you so much for joining us